My name's Cam Marchant. I graduated in 2002. I was the captain of the varsity football team, the varsity hockey team, and the varsity lacrosse team. I think whether it was my captainship or simply playing sports here, it was the guys I played with and the coaches that I played for. I have a handful of specific memories, but I think the thing that I take with me most and that I value the most were the relationships that I created while I was playing sports here at Nobles. It varies by sport. I think in terms of maintaining culture, it was very much something that was passed down year to year. Maybe not necessarily generation to generation, but I think learning from guys who were captains ahead of me. I remember my freshman year in football looking up to Gavin Grant and Justin Jama, who were two captains who even now I think of as almost larger than life, both physically and in terms of their personas. I think playing hockey at Nobles was certainly very special because of the real rich tradition within the league and nationally. So looking up to guys who were captains ahead of me, guys like Chris Owen, guys like John Cronin, Justin Jama as well. And I think a lot of it got passed down almost just by observation, rather than by specific teaching. And then in lacrosse, I certainly think of a guy named Taylor Devon, who was a captain when I was in eighth grade. John Cronin again, and kind of watching them play, watching them compete, watching them interact was really how I think I learned culture and what it meant to play those sports at Nobles. I always think of, with respect to hockey, I think of the banners that used to be up from the Floodmar, and I think of the plaques on the walls in the rink of teams dating back to really the early 20th century, and that was certainly a physical reminder of all the people who had come before me and played that sport. I think that the pictures on the wall and the MAC certainly establish a connection of generations prior, regardless of sport. And then I would say, lastly, the awards I think that we give out at Nobles are a nice way of connecting history to the present. And I always remember looking through who had won those specific awards, going way back, but especially when I started coming to Nobles games as a little kid, because my brother was the class in 1994. I think I learned of those traditions, of those people, of the values of playing sports at Nobles through observation and through looking through those pictures, those plaques, all of those physical objects around campus. My goodness, I was really lucky to play for great coaches, and I would mention all of them. Don Allard in football. I mean, I could go all the way back to Nick Marinaro and Mark Harrington in middle school football and in middle school lacrosse. Tim Carey in middle school hockey. Tom Rezor in varsity hockey my sophomore year. But I certainly think the person that had the biggest influence on me as an athlete was Michael Herring. He was the boys varsity lacrosse coach. I played for him in that. He was the boys varsity basketball coach as well. I didn't play for him in that. But when I think about learning how to compete and learning how to be passionate and what it meant to be a committed, a passionate athlete who had a true love of the game, Michael Herring taught me to do that. When I fast forward a little bit, not necessarily at Nobles, but Jeff Tambroni, who was my lacrosse coach at Cornell, probably taught me more than anybody else about what it means to be a leader. And what he always said, and I pass this on to my players now, is don't worry about being a great leader, just worry about being a great teammate. And if you can be a great teammate, being a great leader will take care of itself. I wouldn't have torn up my knee in senior year. That certainly, but that's not one you can really control. I think the biggest challenge for me was literally not being able to physically play as a captain. And that's a tough hand to be dealt, because so much of what I think makes great captains is setting an example day in and day out, and how you go about your business, and leading by example and not necessarily leading verbally. That said, I think even if you are dealt that hand, you still can lead by example. You still can attack whatever individual challenge you have, and your teammates will respond to that. Even if it's not necessarily working hard in practice or going out and scoring goals, whatever it might be in your specific sport during games. I think another challenge for captains is making tough decisions and holding people accountable and doing things that aren't necessarily easy. That might be getting on somebody and demanding more from them if they're not playing with the effort that the team requires. That might be pushing somebody to make the right decision on a Saturday night and not make a wrong decision that could potentially negatively impact that individual and your team. I think those are the tough things about being a captain, is ultimately putting your individual needs to the side, and the individual needs of other people's individual needs to the side in order to help the team find success. I think I would describe myself probably as a leader by example. I think every leader has to be vocal to a certain extent, but I don't think you have to necessarily be the person who dominates conversation. I don't think you have to be the person that says something in every huddle or even before every game. I do think as a leader, and I'd like to think that I did this, you need to have relationships with every single person on that team that you're tasked with leading. And I think you have to bring energy day in and day out. And I'd like to think that I did that, but might be a better question for the guys that I was playing with. I would say first and foremost, keep in mind that this is still ultimately, this is about the team. It's not about you. And you're going to be in tough situations, but you're in those situations. You are a captain. You are there to lead because your peers respect you, and you've earned being in that situation. And remember that it's what's best for the team. Ultimately, that's why you're there, and don't lose sight of that when you are put in this position of leadership, this position of power. I'd also say it's really important to figure out what your style of leadership is. Different captains come in varieties of shapes, sizes, and demeanors. Just because you've observed certain captains that have certain styles doesn't necessarily mean that you have to fit that mold. Your peers put you in this position of leadership because they believe in you, because they believe in your values. They want you to lead them in your style. Yes, the perspective is different now because I think we asked different things of our athletes now than when I was a captain and athlete here at Nobles. And what do I mean by that? I mean that now there are a lot more demands on what's going on outside of Nobles with respect to training and clubs than there were when I played. So I think that leadership role has a different wrinkle to it that wasn't there when I was a player. When I played, we would play Milton Academy in football on a Saturday afternoon, and then we went and we started playing hockey practice on that Tuesday. We would finish hockey practice, whatever it was, early March, and then one day later we would start lacrosse practice. So there was a lot more fluidity, and I would say there was almost all of us played 3 sports, but we didn't do nearly the same amount of work, of training outside of Nobles. So I think that places an additional wrinkle on captains.